Today's topic: how to pick the right lens for DSLR photography. Welcome. This is another episode for my podcast, and if you've been following this journey, we've got a few episodes lined up for you. Today we're talking about lenses and what lenses will be right for you for DSLR photography. It's a big world out there for lenses, so you'll see there's loads of options. If you haven't already seen the episode before this one, episode 2 was concentrating on how to choose a camera for photography. So this is building on that to give you an idea of what lenses are available. So let's get into it. DSLR photography is a whole massive area. You get cameras, different brands of cameras, lenses. You can attach lenses to different cameras, but you're in the right place. What we're going to do is simplify all of that information and give it to you in a jargon-free way. So if you're new to photography, this should make sense. So I'll make this into a few segments. What I'll do is I'll speak to you about the lenses as a starter, and then we'll deep dive into the other types of lenses that are available and what each lens brings to you, as in what can you actually do with it differently than you would do with a normal lens that you get as part of a kit. So if you buy a camera and a kit body. So if I mention a few types of lenses, so you got your standard lenses. What we mean by standard is something along the lines of the 50mm. So they have an angle of view which is roughly similar to how we view. So if you're looking at something, you'll see that same perspective. There's things like macro lenses. They're designed more for getting up and close. So if you're doing close-up photography, if you're looking to bring out detail and you want it to be sharp, you'll find quickly some lenses, if you want to get really close to a subject. So say for example, I'm photographing this mug. Well, it looks like a lens, but it's a mug. It's quite a cool one actually. So anything that you're photographing, so for example, be it a lens, you're using your camera. The closer you get to that object, you'll find your focus distance comes into play. This is getting a bit more technical, but macro lenses, basically you can get quite close up to your subject and get a clear focus, and it gives you a clear image. Apart from that, other side of things, you've got telephoto lenses. That's something more designed for longer distance sports photographers, sometimes fashion photography, where you see the people with those really big lenses. But those are designed to get you closer to the subject, and there's different levels of telephoto lenses which we'll cover. So that's a few options. Something which maybe landscape photographers would look at, or if you're taking photography for indoors, so maybe an estate agent taking photos of rooms, houses, or even car photography, wide angle lenses. They're basically designed to show you more of what you're photographing, and that's a few lenses. Kit lenses I'll put into a certain category. So normally when you get a camera, especially a new one, will come with a lens. They're designed to be suitable to give you images throughout that range. So whether you're taking close-up photos, some kit lenses have a macro ability, and you can get a wide angle and a telephoto angle in that lens. So that's quite good as a starter. There's nothing wrong with getting a kit lens and using it for a good couple of years, 2 or 3 years, where you can find out, actually I'm taking loads of photos and they're at a specific focal length, for example. If you get any software and you download the pictures to the computer, you can see what's your common trend of photos, what are you shooting, which touches back to things we spoke about in the previous episode. If you haven't checked that out, I'll link in the description. You can easily hop onto that and get up to speed. So focal length, what I mean when I say focal length is the most important factor, I'll say, for the lens, because it's determining type of lens. Because if I give you a focal length of say 200mm, you'll know that's, well, it depends. If you're new, you may not know. So 200mm is the distance of the glass from the camera. I didn't explain that very well. What I'll do is I'll go into that in a bit more detail because I want to keep this brief at the moment. So we've covered the lenses. That kind of lets you know what types of lenses are out there, especially if you're new to photography. You want to know if it's a telephoto lens, what that means, if it's a wide lens, what that means, macro or a standard focal length. And the numbers, the focal length. So, for example, an ultra wide angle would be something between an 8mm and a 24mm. So that's a wide scape view. You'll see wide angles can also be 24 to 35mm. So interiors, architecture, landscape shots, those kind of things. A general purpose lens tends to be between 35 and 85mm, with 50mm being a common one. So that gives you an idea. So if I loosely mention those, and then that gives you an idea of the lower the number, the wider the view. So if I've got a 24mm in my photo, I can stand in the same place and I'll see a certain amount of the subject. And if that number decreases, so it gets higher, so 135mm, that reduces what you see. It's magnifying in a way. That's like kind of making it simple. So that's lenses. To add to the complications of lenses, you've got different types of lenses, such as prime lenses or zoom lenses. Prime lenses refer to a fixed focal length. So if it's 50mm, it's always going to be 50mm. Whereas a zoom lens, if it's a 24 to 70mm, you've got two numbers there, which means you can play about a bit more between 24 and 70mm. So you've got a wide selection of uh, focal lengths between that. So if you're standing somewhere, you don't want to move around much, you can basically zoom into the subject. And the choice between prime and zoom depends on your level of experience. So there's nothing wrong with having a 50mm focal length and then discovering, actually I'm taking pictures but I'm having to get really close up or really far back to get the photo in frame. That's when you look at the other options. So you can look at getting a different lens based on your needs. So don't just end up buying every lens and having like loads of gear. If ideally when you're taking photos, if you can tailor it to what you're doing, your lens would always have a space in your camera bag because you know you're going to use it. Aperture. So we briefly covered this, but not in enough detail. So I'm going to dedicate a whole episode about aperture and explain what it means. But these are the numbers that refer to the well, lens aperture. It determines how much light is let through. So more often than not, a wider aperture, meaning a lower f number, is preferable if you like to take photos in dark environments. So say for example we're doing a concert or an event and lights are really low. In this example, maybe even because it's quite dark, you can see here, and I've got light kind of just illuminating my face. However, if you're in an environment where there's not much light, you want the lowest aperture possible. So example 50mm 1.4 lens is a 1.4 aperture, which lets in more light. Smaller the number, the wider the opening. So if I had a f4, that's a higher number, so the opening is getting smaller, which is not letting in as much light. That's like a little bit of information there about lights. The downside of having a wide aperture is the cost. So lenses that have a lower aperture will cost you a bit more. So for example, the 1.8 isn't that expensive. A 50mm 1.8 is relatively cheap. But if you go down, so 1.4, 1.2, the 50mm for Canons, for example, the price gets higher because you're getting more light in. Focusing is another thing with lenses. So lenses in particular have a different type of focusing. There's a few different things you want to look out for. Most modern cameras with lenses have a built-in autofocus mechanism. So it kind of does all the work for you. In the past, you would have to manually focus. So that's something to keep in mind in terms of the focusing types. Some have ultrasonic motors. All that means is it focuses quicker. And for macro or just random photography, candid photography, it's quite good because they automatically focus for you. Some lenses have image stabilization. So what we mean by that is it's abbreviated normally to IS, and IS is a great thing. For example, if you're shooting and you don't have a tripod, you can turn on your IS and it will stabilize the image. So when you take a photo, it won't be shaky, it won't be blurry. Well, relatively speaking, if you're correctly exposed and you're taking a picture, it gives you assistance to reduce the well, blurriness in photos. Basically, makes it sharper. And so it's a bit of learning involved. As you become a photographer, you'll spend a few years getting to your limitations of your current lens, and then you'll see where you want to improve and what things you need. Some people may not need image stabilization. If they always use a tripod, they don't have to have it. Lens fit, so you get different types of mounts. So if you're looking online for lenses, make sure you know what your camera body allows and what fit camera you're getting, because some of the other brand cameras like Tamron, Sigma will make EF mounts for Canon and Nikon mounts. So if you're buying online and you see one of them is cheaper, could be because it's not your fit for your camera. Size and weight, that's a big one. So lenses, you have space in your bag for lenses, but depending on what it's giving you back, is it worth having a heavier lens? In my case, I have a 70 to 200 2.8 IS lens, very, you could say very heavy lens for someone who's not interested in photography. It looks quite large. So what you can do with that is, if you find a need for a heavy lens, it doesn't matter, the weight's not an issue. However, if you're carrying an extra lens around but you don't use that much, why? You're just doing yourself harm, aren't you? You gotta have a sore back unless you've got a case, but then just carrying extra kit for nothing. So buying a camera lens, by making sure you're doing enough research and you know what your style is, and you're doing great by the way, because you're listening to podcasts like this where you're getting information about the types of lenses available, and then you're going to make an informed decision. But what I will do is I'll point you to a few links in the description where you can check out a few more articles about this, and Reddit is a good place to check out. People post things about the lenses they've got, what they find, how they're finding it. So it's a great community, especially with the YouTube channels as well. You can search online and that'll give you quite a lot of information. What I will link you to that, and you can actually check that out as well. So in the description you'll see some information, and there will be cards throughout this that you can check out to make sure you're on the right path. But yeah, this is basically covering the main, well, topic, isn't it, where you want to buy a lens and what type of lens it should be. This has been informative. I'm hoping you can get on to the next episode, which will give you more information. And I'll catch you on the next one. On the left is what YouTube thinks you should be watching, and on the right is a link to a playlist for learning photography, which would help you. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure to subscribe so these notifications come directly to you.